Summary: population in an area is expanding, stable, or declining depending upon the population density in that area. Population growth depends mainly upon four factors: natality, mortality, immigration, and emigration. Natality and mortality are considered at normal conditions, while emigration and immigration are considered at special conditions. Growth models are of two types. When resources are unlimited, it is exponential growth, and when sources are limited, it is logistic growth. Population interactions are mutualism, competition, predation, parasitism, commensalism, and amensalism. Population. Population attributes. In nature, we rarely find isolated single individuals of any species. Majority of live them in groups in well-defined geographical area, share or compete for similar sources, potentially interbreed and thus constitute a population. Although the term interbreeding implies sexual reproduction, a group of individuals resulting from even asexual reproduction is also generally considered a population for the purpose of ecological studies. All the cormorants in a wetland, rats in an abandoned dwelling, teakwood trees in a forest tract, bacteria in a culture plate, and lotus plant in a pond are some examples of a population. In earlier chapters, you have learned that although an individual organism is the one that has to cope with a changed environment, it is at the population level that natural selection operates to evolve the desired traits. Population ecology is therefore an important area because it links ecology to population genetics and evolution. A population has certain attributes whereas an individual organism does not. An individual may have births and deaths, but a population has birth rates and death rates. In a population, these rates refer to per capita births and deaths. The rates hence expressed are change in numbers with respect to the members of the population. Here is an example. If in a pond there were 20 lotus plants last year, and though reproduction 8 new plants are added, taking the current population to 28, we calculate the birth rate as 8 by 20 is equals to 0.4 offsprings per lotus per year. If 4 individuals in a laboratory population of 40 fruit flies dies during a specified time interval, say a week, the death rate in the population during that period 4 by 40 is 0.1 individuals fruit fly per week. Another attribute characteristic of a population is sex ratio. An individual is either male or a female, but a population has sex ratio. Example: 60% of the population are females and 40% are males. A population at any given time is composed of individuals of different ages. If the age distribution percent individuals of age or age group is plotted for the population, the resulting structure is called age pyramid. For human population, the age pyramid generally shows age distribution of males and females in a diagram. The shape of the pyramids reflects the growth status of the population, whether it is growing in triangular shaped pyramid, it is stable in bell shaped pyramid, or it is declining in a urn or spindle shaped pyramid. The size of the population tells us a lot about its status in the habitat. Whatever ecologically processes we wish to investigate in a population, be it the outcome of the competition with another species, the impact of the predator, or the effect of pesticide application, we always evaluate them in terms of any change in the population size. The size in nature could be as low as less than 10 Siberian cranes at Bharatpur wetlands in any year, or go into millions Chlamydomonas in a pond. Population size, technically called population density, designated as capital N, need not be necessarily measured in numbers only. Although total number is generally the most appropriate measure of population density, it is in some cases either meaningless or difficult to determine. In an area, if there are 200 Parthenium plants but only a single huge banyan tree with a large canopy, stating that the population density of banyan tree is low relative to that of Parthenium amounts to underestimating the enormous role of banyan tree in that community. In such cases, the percent cover of or biomass is more meaningful measure of the population size. The total number is not an easily adaptable measure if the population is huge and counting in impossible or very time consuming. If you have a dense laboratory culture of bacteria in a petri dish, what is the best measure to report its density? Sometimes, for certain ecological investigations, there is no need to know the absolute population densities. Relative densities serve the purpose equally well. For instance, the number of fish caught per trap is good enough to measure the total population density in the lake. We are mostly obliged to estimate population sizes indirectly without actually counting them or seeing them. The tiger census in our national parks and tiger reserves is often based on pug marks and fecal pellets. Population growth. The size of a population for any species is not a static parameter. It keeps changing with time, depending on various factors including food availability, predation pressure, and adverse weather. In fact, it is these changes in population density that give us some idea of what is happening to the population, whether it is flourishing or declining. Whatever might be the ultimate reasons, the density of a population in a given habitat during a given period fluctuates due to changes in four basic processes, two of which, natality and immigration, contribute to increase in population density, and two, mortality and immigration, to a decrease. First, natality refers to number of births during a given period in the population that are added to the initial density. Second, mortality is the number of deaths in the population during a given period. Third, immigration is the number of individuals of the same species that have come into the habitat from elsewhere during the time period under consideration. Emigration is the number of individuals of the population who left the habitat and gone elsewhere during the time period under consideration. You can see that population density will increase if the number of births plus number of immigrants is more than the number of deaths plus number of emigrants. Under normal conditions, births and deaths are the most important factors influencing population density. The other two factors assuming importance only under special conditions. For instance, if a new habitat is just being colonized, immigration may contribute more significantly to population growth than birth rates. Growth models. Does the growth of a population with more time show any specific and predictable pattern? We have been concerned about unbridled human population growth and problems created by it in our country, and it is therefore natural for us to be curious if different animal population in nature behave the same way or show same restraints on growth. Perhaps we can learn a lesson or two from nature on how to control population growth. First, exponential growth. Resource availability is obviously essential for the unimpeded growth of a population. Ideally, when resources in the habitat are unlimited, each species has the ability to realize fully its innate potential to grow in number, as Darwin observed while developing his theory of natural selection. Then the population grows in an exponential or geometric fashion. In a population of size n, the birth rate, not total number but per capita births, are represented as b, and death rates, again per capita death rates, as d. Then increase or decrease in n during a unit time period t, dn by dt will be dn by dt is equals to b minus d into n. Let b minus d is equals to r, then dn by dt is equals to r into n. The r in this equation is called the intrinsic rate of natural increase and is a very important parameter chosen for assessing impacts of any biotic or abiotic factor on population growth. To give you some idea about the magnitude of R values, for the Norway rat R is 0.015, for the flower beetle it is 0.12, for human population R is 0.0205. The above equation describes the exponential or geometric growth pattern of a population and results in a J-shaped curve when we plot n in relation to time. If you are familiar with the basic calculus, you can derive the integral from the exponential growth equation as n at time t is equals to population density at time 0 into exponential raised to the power rt. Any species growing exponentially under unlimited resource condition can reach enormous population densities in a short time. Darwin showed how even a slow growing animals like an elephant could reach enormous numbers in the absence of checks. The following is the anecdote particularly narrated to demonstrate dramatically how fast a population could build up when growing exponentially. Second is logistic growth. No population of any species in nature has at its disposal unlimited resources to permit exponential growth. This leads to competition between individuals for limited sources. Eventually, the fittest individual will survive and reproduce. The governments of many countries have also realized this fact and introduced various restraints with a few to a limited human population growth. In nature, a given habitat has enough resources to support a maximum possible number beyond which no further growth is possible. Let us call this limit as nature's carrying capacity or for that species in the habitat. A population growing in the habitat with limited sources show initially a lag phase followed by phases of acceleration and deceleration and finally an asymptote. When the population density reaches the carrying capacity, a lot of n in relation to time results in a sigmoid curve. This type of population growth is called Verhulst-Pearl logistic growth and is described by the following equation: dn by dt is equals to r into n in bracket k minus n by k. Since resources for growth for most animal populations are finite and become limiting sooner or later, the logistic growth model is considered as more realistic one. Life history variation. Population evolved to maximize their reproductive fitness, also called Darwinian fitness, high R value, in the habitat in which they live. Under a particular set of selection pressures, organisms evolve towards the most efficient reproductive strategy. Some organisms breed only once in their lifetime, example Pacific fish, bamboo, while others breed many times during their lifetime, most birds and mammals. Some produce a large number of small-sized offsprings, example oysters and pelagic fishes, while others produce a small number of large-size offsprings, birds and mammals. So, which is desirable for maximizing fitness? Ecologists suggest that life history traits of organisms have evolved in relation to the constraints imposed by the abiotic and biotic components of the habitat in which they live. Evolution of life history traits in different species is currently an important area of research being conducted by the zoologists. Population interactions. Can you think of any natural habitat on Earth that is inhabited just by one single species? There is no such habitat and such a situation is even inconceivable. For any species, The minimal requirement is one more species on which it can feed. Even a plant species, which makes its own food, cannot survive alone. It needs soil microbes to break down the organic matter in soil and return the inorganic nutrients for absorption. And then, how will the plant manage pollination without an animal agent? It is obvious that in nature, animals, plants, and microbes do not and cannot live in isolation but interact in various ways to form a biological community. Even in minimal communities, many interactive linkages exist, although all may not be readily apparent. Interspecific interactions arise from the interaction of population of two different species. They could be beneficial, detrimental, or neutral, neither harm nor benefit to one of the species or both. Assigning a plus sign for beneficial interaction and a minus sign for detrimental and 0 for neutral interaction, let us look at all possible outcomes of interspecific interactions. Plus plus mutualism, minus minus competition, plus minus predation, plus minus parasitism, plus 0 commensalism, minus 0 amensalism. Both the species benefit in mutualism and both lose in competition in their interactions with each other. In both parasitism and predation, only one species benefits and the interaction is detrimental to the other species. The interaction where one species is benefited and the other is neither benefited nor harmed is called commensalism. In amensalism, on the other hand, one species is harmed whereas the other is unaffected. Predation, parasitism, and commensalism share a common characteristic. The interacting species live closely together. First, predation. What happen to all the energy fixed by autotrophic organisms if the community has no animals to eat plants? You can think of predation as nature's way of transferring to higher trophic levels the energy fixed by plants. When we think of predator and prey, most probably it is the tiger and the deer that readily come to our mind. But a sparrow eating any seed is no less than a predator. Although animals eating birds are categorized separately as herbivores, they are, in a broad ecological context, not very different from predators. Besides acting as conduits for energy transfer across trophic levels, predators play other important roles. Predators keep prey populations under control, but for predators, prey species could achieve a very high population densities and cause ecosystem instability. When certain exotic species are introduced into a geographical area, they become invasive and start spreading fast because the invaded land does not have its natural predators. The prickly pear cactus, introduced into Australia in the early 1920s, caused havoc by spreading rapidly into millions of hectares of rangeland. Finally, the invasive cactus was brought under control only after a cactus feeding predator, a moth, from its natural habitat was introduced into the country. Biological control methods adapted in agricultural pest control are based on the ability of the predator to regulate prey population. Predators also help in maintaining species diversity in a community. By reducing the intensity of competition among competing prey species in the rocky intertidal communities of the American Pacific coast, the starfish pisaster is an important predator. In a field experiment, when all starfish were removed from an enclosed intertidal area, more than 10 species of invertebrates become extinct within a year because of interspecific competition. If a predator is too efficient and overexploits its prey, then the prey might become extinct, and following it, the predator will also become extinct for lack of food. This is the reason why predators in nature are prudent. When species have evolved, various defenses lessen the impact of predation. Some species of insects and frog are cryptically colored, camouflaged to avoid being detected easily by the predator. Some are poisonous and therefore avoided by the predators. The monarch butterfly is highly distasteful to its predator bird because of a special chemical present in its body. Interestingly, the butterfly acquires this chemical during its caterpillar stage by feeding on a poisonous weed. For plants, herbivores are the predators. Nearly 25% of all insects are known to be phytophagous, feeding on plant sap and on other parts of plant. The problem is particularly severe for plants because, unlike animals, they cannot run away from their predators. Plants therefore have evolved an astonishing variety of morphological and chemical defenses against herbivores. Thorns, acacia cactus are most common morphological means of defense. Many plants produce and store chemicals that make the herbivore sick when they are eaten, inhibit feeding or digestion, disrupt its reproduction, or even kill it. You must have seen the weed Calotropis growing on abundant fields. The plant produces highly poisonous cardiac glycosides, and that is why you never see any cattle or goats browsing on this plant. A wide variety of chemical substances that we extract from plants on commercial scale, nicotine, caffeine, quinine, strychnine, opium, etc., are produced by them actually as defenses against grazers and browsers. Competition. When Darwin spoke of the struggle for existence and survival of the fittest in nature, he was convinced that interspecific competition is a potent force in organic evolution. It is generally believed that competition occurs when closely related species compete for the same resource that are limiting, but this is not entirely true. First, totally unrelated species could also compete for the same source. For instance, in some shallow South American lakes, visiting flamingos and resident fishes compete for their common food, the zooplankton in the lake. Secondly, resources need not to be limiting for the competition to occur. In interference competition, the feeding efficiency of one species might be reduced due to the interfering and inhibitory presence of other species, even if resources, food, and space are abundant. Therefore, competition is best defined as a process in which the fitness of one species, measured in terms of its R, the intrinsic rate of increase, is significantly lower in the presence of another species. It is relatively easy to demonstrate in laboratory experiments, as Gauss and other experimental ecologists did. When resources are limited, the competitively superior species will eventually eliminate the other species, but evidence for such competitive exclusion occurring in nature is not always true. Strong and persuasive circumstantial evidence does exist, however, in some cases. The circumstantial evidence does not exist in some cases. The abandoned tortoise in Galapagos Island became extinct within a decade after goats were introduced on this island, apparently due to the greater browsing efficiency of the goats. Another evidence for the occurrence of competition in nature comes from what is called competitive release. A species whose distribution is restricted to a small geographical area because of the presence of competitively superior species is found to expand its distributional range dramatically when the competing species is experimentally removed. Connell's elegant field experiment showed that the rocky coast of Scotland, the larger and competitively superior Barnacle, Balanus, dominates the intertidal area and excludes the smaller Barnacle, Chathamalus, from that zone. In general, herbivores and plants appear to be more adversely affected by competition than carnivores. Gauss' competitive exclusion principle states that two closely related species competing for the same resource cannot coexist indefinitely, and the competitively inferior one will be eliminated eventually. This may be true if resources are limiting, but not otherwise. More recent studies do not support such gross generalization about competition. While they do not rule out the occurrence of interspecific competition in nature, they point out that species facing competition might evolve mechanisms that promote coexistence rather than exclusion. One such mechanism is resource partitioning. If two species compete for the same resource, they could avoid competition by choosing, for instance, different times for feeding or different foraging patterns. MacArthur showed that five closely related species of warblers living on the same tree were able to avoid competition and coexist due to behavioral differences in their foraging activities. Parasitism. Considering that the parasitic mode of life ensures free lodging and meals, it is not surprising that parasitism has evolved in so many taxonomic groups and from plants to higher vertebrates. Many parasites have evolved to be host specific. They can parasitize only a single species of host in such a way that both the host and the parasite tend to co-evolve. That is, if the host evolves special mechanism for rejecting or resisting the parasite has to evolve mechanisms to counteract and neutralize them in order to be successful with the same host species. In accordance with their lifestyles, parasites evolved special adaptations such as loss of unnecessary sense organs, presence of adhesive organs or sucker to climb on the host, loss of digestive system, and high reproductive capacity. The life cycles of parasites are often complex, involving one or two intermediate hosts or vectors to facilitate parasitization of the primary host. The human liver fluke trematode parasite depends on two intermediate hosts, a snail and a fish, to complete its life cycle. The malarial parasite needs a vector, mosquito, to spread to other hosts. Majority of the parasites harm the hosts. They may reduce the survival, growth and reproduction of the host and reduce its population density. They might render the host more vulnerable to predation by making it physically weak. Parasites that feed on the external surface of the host organisms are called ectoparasites. The most familiar examples of these groups are lice on humans and ticks on dogs. Many marine fish are infested with ectoparasite copepods. Cascata, a parasitic plant that is commonly found in growing on hedge plants, has lost its chlorophyll and lives in the course of evolution. Cascata derives its nourishment from the host plant which it parasitizes. The female mosquito is not considered as parasite, although it needs our blood for reproduction. In contrast, endoparasites are those that live inside the host body at different sites, liver, kidney, lungs, RBC, etc. The life cycles of endoparasites are more complex because of their extreme specializations. Their morphological and anatomical features are greatly simplified while emphasizing their reproductive potential. Brood parasitism in birds is a fascinating example of parasitism in which the parasitic bird lay its eggs in the nest of the host and lets the host incubate them. During the course of evolution, the eggs of the parasitic bird have evolved to resemble the host egg in size and color to reduce the chances of the host bird detecting the foreign eggs and ejecting them from the nest. Try to follow the movements of a cuckoo, quail, and the crow in your neighborhood park during the breeding season, spring to summer, and watch brood parasitism in action. Commensalism. This is the interaction in which one species benefits and the other is neither benefited nor harmed. An orchid growing as an epiphyte on a mango branch and barnacles growing on the back of the whale benefit, while the mango tree nor the whale derives any apparent benefit. The cattle egret and grazing cattle in close association a sight you are most likely to catch if you live on farmed rural areas, is a classic example of commensalism. The egrets always forage close to where the cattle are grazing because the cattle, as they move, stir up and flush out insects from the vegetation that otherwise might be difficult for the egrets to find and catch. Another example of commensalism is the interaction between sea anemone that has stinging capsules and the clownfish that lives on them. The fish gets protection from the predators which they stay away from the stinging tentacles. The anemone does not appear to derive any benefit by hosting the clownfish. Mutualism. This interaction confers benefits on both interacting species. Lichens represent an intimate mutualistic relationships between a fungus and photosynthetic algae or cyanobacteria. Similarly, the mycorrhizae are associations between fungi and the roots of higher plants. The fungi help the plant in the absorption of essential nutrients from the soil, while the plant in turn provides the fungi with energy yielding carbohydrates. The most spectacular and evolutionary fascinating examples of mutualism are the plant animal relationships. Plants need the help of animals for pollinating their flowers and dispersing their seeds. Animals obviously have to be paid fees for the services that plants expect from them. Plants offer rewards for or fees in the form of pollen and nectar for pollinators and juicy and nutritious fruits for seed dispersers. But the mutually beneficial system should also be safeguarded against cheaters. For example, animals that try to steal nectar without aiding in pollination. Now you can see why plant animal interaction often involve co-evolution of the mutualists. That is, the evolutions of the flower and its pollinator species are tightly linked with one another. In many species of fig trees, there is tight one-to-one relationship with the pollinator species of wasp. It means that a fig species can be pollinated only by its partner wasp species and no other species. The female wasp uses the fruit not only as an oviposition egg-laying site but uses the developing seed within the fruit for nourishing its larvae. The wasp pollinates the fig inflorescence while searching for suitable egg-laying sites. In return for the favor of pollination, the fig offers wasp some of its developing seeds as food for the developing wasp larvae. Orchids show a bewildering diversity of floral patterns, many of which have evolved to attract the right pollinator insects, bees and bumblebees, and ensure guaranteed pollination by it. Not all orchids offer rewards. The Mediterranean orchid Ophrys employs sexual deceit to get pollination done by a species of bee. One petal of its flower bears an uncanny resemblance to the female of the bee in size, color, and markings. The male bee is attracted to what it perceives as a female, pseudocopulates with the flower, and during that process is dusted with pollen from the flower. When the same bee pseudocopulates with another flower, it transfers the pollen to it and thus pollinates the flower. Hence, you can see how co-evolution operates. If the female bee's color patterns change even slightly for any reason during evolution, pollination success will be reduced unless the orchid flower co-evolves to maintain the resemblance of its petal to the female bee.